I had a hard time building friendships the first 10 and a half years of my life. My family moved a lot, and we're all over the city, a bunch of schools, neighborhoods, and maybe I was weird too. I'm gonna go with the moving thing. And there's all these times where I had to just figure it out. I had to just find friends. And this is gonna sound like it's from a different dimension, but there was a time when you had to just go outside to find friends. I had to leave my house and wander the streets, just out and about trying to find people. And that's what I do. I just go outside and groups of people would just be playing football on the street, on the road. Unsafe as that might sound, that's what I did. And I'd just go do that and hang and play football, and friends kind of formed a little bit. Or I'd go down the end of my street was dunk hoops. It's the only way that I could dunk ever were dunk hoops. They're that tall. And Ironwood Elementary School, and people just show up and just make friends while I'm there. And then there's a park at the end of my street, and I remember this group of people. I didn't know them well yet, but we just kind of started to hang together as we were building this zip line, and we grabbed braided rope and tied it to the top of one tree and then took it to the trunk of another tree. And then we grabbed a leather belt and we wrapped that over it, and we'd slide down the rope zip line, which sounds like a really good idea. Now, terrible idea. 3 or 4 times in, this guy is up at the top. I can see it so vividly. He begins his zip line journey, and it tears in half, and he falls 15 feet from the top of the zip line to the ground on his back, as hard as I've ever seen a human fall. I think he's still there. It's been 30 years. And we would just figure out friendship and just find friends. And sometimes it was the circumstances of being on a bus, and I had bus. Anybody ride the bus? Anybody ride the bus growing up? Ride the bus now maybe to school, and you just kind of meet people. And I had my lunchroom friends, and at my school we had an open lunch, which I don't think is legal in the States anymore, but we had open lunch, and from freshman year all the way throughout, if you had a way to leave, feet, you could go. And I had this friend named Andy who had the biggest car I've ever seen in my life. It was a Buick thing, 4-door, had to be 50 feet long. And Andy was 16 our freshman year. I don't know how. He graduated and he was 28. And we get in his car every day, and PE class both years. PE class was right before lunch, and so we'd sneak off campus early. He parked his car in the alley right next to the school, and we'd get out, so we'd have the first to lunch, so we'd beat the lines of people that were also going to the same place we were going, which was Burger King. And we never deviated from that every day. For a year and a half, I ate nothing but Whoppers. That was it. Whopper meals every single day for a year and a half, and it was glorious. Jake likes Arby's. I think Arby's is trash. I think Burger King's mildly better. I'm not gonna argue much over that, but so I just had these friends, and it wasn't until I became a Christian. It wasn't until about my sophomore year of high school. I was 15, and I recognized that what I needed around me was a different type of friend. I loved the friends that I had just kind of growing up, and some people from my neighborhood, and those friends were convenient, but I needed a Christ-centered friend. And Josh came into my life as that. He's my Christ-centered friend. And what I recognized is that those types of friendships, those Christ-centered friendships, are built more than they're found. And sometimes you can kind of stumble into that and randomly arrive at a friendship like that. But more times than not, these are our friendships that are built over time and with intentionality and with sacrifice. And we began this series last week. Jake kicked off with this how to friendship concept because we just know it's a need. We know it's a need not just for students, it's a need for adults, might even be more of a need for adults than we can even imagine. But we recognize that there's just all this struggle when it comes to building really good friendships. And we wanted to jump in on that. And Jake began last week with the concept of staying, that Christ-centered friends, they stay. Love the message straight out of the life of Ruth. And if you didn't check it out, you can watch it on YouTube. And that's how we began, that's how we built. And I want to jump in this week with another concept that can help us build the types of friendships that we want. And for some of you, you're thinking, cool, what if I'm not Christ-centered? Like, I'm here, I'm figuring it out, I don't really know what I believe, or I do know what I believe, and it's not that. I think this can still matter for you. I think this message can still apply for you. In fact, this series can apply to your life in some ways if you'll allow it. And today, I want to jump into the life of someone that has all kinds of experience in this facet today, what we're going to talk about with this specific quality of friendship and how to build a Christ-centered friendship. And it's a New Testament dude named Paul. We talk about him a lot. We reference Paul a lot. It's kind of hard not to. He wrote most of the New Testament, most prolific author we have in the New Testament. And I think if Paul, we're going to be in the book of Galatians, by the way. If you have your Bible, if you have your Bible app, if you just want to Google Galatians and tag along with me, we'll be in Galatians chapter 2. You'll need it here. You'll need it in discussion as well. Galatians chapter 2, we're going to begin in verse 11. But if you were to interview Paul's friendships, the people that Paul trusted and brought into his circle, I think what we'd hear is some people describing Paul as an acquired taste. You ever heard that phrase before about people it's kind of an acquired taste? That's like a subtle way of saying they're kind of hard to be around. They're a little difficult, a little salty, a little sandpapery. You have any friends like that? You have any friends that come to mind who are I know exactly who you're talking about? Someone that you love them, you love to be around them, but they're just a little tough to be around. Are you that friend, by the way? Some of you in here are. That's me. That's me. I'm hard to be around. Well, Paul, I think his friends would describe him as this, and I want to just talk about one experience that Paul has with one of his friends, and we'll kind of take some thoughts from it. Chapter 2, I'll read here in verse 11, and we're going to pick up together in verse 14. But in verse 11, Paul is writing to a group of churches, a bunch of Christians, and he's giving them this account between him and one of his best friends. Best friend's name is Cephas. We know him as Peter. And he says that he came to Antioch, and he says, I opposed him to his face because he stood condemned. So he's calling him out. Telling everybody, too, that he's called him out. For before certain men came from James, he used to eat with Gentiles. And so what he's saying is Cephas used to care about the people that didn't know Jesus, and now he doesn't. He used to spend time eating meals with people that were not religious, and then some people that came from the group that James was with kind of dissuaded him from spending time with the Gentile group. Gentile group is a non-religious, a non-Jew person. And all of a sudden, Cephas, Peter said, I'm not going to hang with them. I'm not going to spend time with them. And Paul has a problem with that. So he goes directly at Peter and company. And then he says in verse 13, the other Jews joined him in his hypocrisy, so that by their hypocrisy, even Barnabas was led astray. So Barnabas is one of the guys that if you look in Acts chapter 15, another example of Paul going to battle with one of his best buddies is Barnabas. But then in verse 14, he says, when I saw that they were not acting in line, where am I at? When I saw that, words are tough. When I saw that they were not acting in line with the truth of the gospel, I said to Cephas in front of them all, you are a Jew, yet you live like a Gentile, and not like a Jew. How is it then that you force Gentiles to follow Jewish customs? He's saying this. Hey, listen, you gave your life to Jesus, and we're about Jesus, but you're making it really hard for people that want to come to Jesus. You're adding extra laws and extra rules and extra ceremonies, and you're making it challenging for them. That's not what we're doing. So it calls them out, goes direct with it. And that is one small example of the way that Paul rolled. Here's what I want to talk about today, is that Christ-centered friends challenge. Christ-centered friends challenge. You hear that, and I don't know what you think. My guess is that some of you love the idea. Most of you hate it. You don't love challenging other people. You don't love to be challenged. This feels very uncomfortable. We have some peacemakers in here. You're like, no confrontation. No conflict, please. I like smooth water. I like things to be calm and chill, and I'm not looking for any type of friction whatsoever. Anybody in here kind of like that? I'm not about that. I don't want to challenge. Some of you wake up wanting to challenge. You wake up wanting to make other people better. Why do we need to live this way? Why is challenging in our friendships so important? I don't think we can become the people that God has called us to be without those in our life pushing us to be better. I don't think God can, I don't think our lives will be what they can be without other people around us showing us, exemplifying, sometimes pushing us to be better. Paul modeled this, and he modeled this with Cephas, with Barnabas, with Titus. He modeled this with Mark. Almost every one of his friendships had this like awesome, challenging dynamic, because he knew that what he wanted out of that friendship wasn't just to be a jerk, wasn't to be a jerk at all, actually. He wanted his life to model more of what Christ looked like. He wanted their life to model more of what Christ looked like. Let me break down for us, just to give us some real practical things to think about as we go into our groups tonight. What could this look like? What types of challenging are we talking about? What types of challenging are we talking about? Well, first and foremost, it's the challenge to be better. It's that we challenge those around us to be better. 1 Thessalonians tells us this, to encourage one another and build each other up, just as in fact you were doing. Like, it's a part of what we're supposed to do, is to challenge and encourage. You can do that without saying a word, though, by the way. You can simply live your life in such a way that people watch you. Watch the way that you interact, watch the way that you treat one another, watch the decisions you make, and they can be encouraged by that. And they can be challenged by our example. But sometimes we have to use words. Sometimes we have to push a little bit, and we have to have a tough conversation with others about who they are, to challenge them to be better. You see someone in a friend group of yours, you go to church with them, they're in your group, like you have a faith that's in alignment with theirs, but all of a sudden you see that they just start to change a little bit. It's subtle. You start to see that who they're hanging around with changes their behavior a little bit. Like when they're here, they're one person. When they're on the team, they're a different person. When they're at school, they're yet a third. I mean, you just see this variation of who they are. That'd be the type of situation that you can call them out, or you can call them to be better. Or you have friends that get into a dating relationship, and maybe it's okay. Maybe they're not doing anything that's out of bounds per se, but all of their time and all of their priorities is just about that person. You know that one? That all of a sudden, like, friendship doesn't matter anymore. Maybe church doesn't matter anymore, and it's just about the date. It's just about their boyfriend, just about their girlfriend. And who would ever say anything? When I was thinking about this, some people came to mind real quickly. I've had 2 conversations in the past year or so, maybe less than that. And both of these conversations are really similar, that I've got some friends that have called me out on my behavior. One of my friends called me out, and it's about the way that I speak, my tone. He said, hey, sometimes like the way that you speak makes people think that you don't like them. That's my translation. He's like, sometimes you speak so definitively and so directly that I'm not sure, it doesn't feel like love. And another friend say the same thing, but he's like, I sense that same thing, and I've kind of seen it in your marriage. Told him he's stupid. It's like, that's wildly untrue. I didn't. He's right. I have people in my life, don't always like it, but I have people in my life that have permission to call me out, to call me to be better, because I need work, and I need that. Do you? You have people in your life that have permission to help you be better, call you out? Do you have that type of relationship with someone else? Secondly, this one's gonna be a little challenge. Hang with me. It's to call out sin. What kind of challenging we have? We have the ability to call people to be better, and then secondly, to call out sin. And this one can get a little confusing, and some of you are like already, nah, not me. That's not what I'm doing, or that's not what we're supposed to do. I just want you to hang with me for a minute. Look into a couple of these texts with me. Matthew chapter 18. This is Jesus speaking. He says, if your brother or sister sins, so this is assuming it's a believer, and you're a believer. Go and point out their fault just between the two of you. You don't need to bring this to a big group of people. You don't need to call out in a friend setting. You don't need to do this in group. This is just between the two of you. And if they listen to you, you have won them over. But if they will not listen, you take one or two others along, so that every matter may be established by the testimony of two or three witnesses. You should bring some more people to be a part of that, to help them. Part of what we're called to do when it comes to Christians, establishing like when they're in sin. Galatians 6:1 says something very similar. It says, brothers and sisters, once again, not talking about biological brother and sister, talking about like the family of believers, fellow Christians. If someone is caught in a sin, and that's not necessarily that you had to go out and like root out or dig up sin in their life. It was found out. It says, you who live by the Spirit should restore that person gently. Operative word, gently. It's grace, it's love. It says, but watch yourself, or you also may be tempted. Like when you're having these types of conversations with people, just be cautious of it, because you don't want to get entangled in the same type of sin that they may be a part of. And then Matthew chapter 7 is critical. It says, why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own? This is Jesus. It says, how can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, while all the time there's a plank in your own eye? You hypocrite, first take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. What's he saying? Well, what we often think is like it's not our job to judge. We're not supposed to be in the judgment seat. And I think it depends on what you mean by judge. Like, is it our job to establish and determine what sin is? No, it's not our job. God establishes what sin is. Is it our job to dictate and determine what the consequence of sin is? No, that's what God does. Is it our job to help our brothers and sisters and for them to help us when we are entangled in sin? Absolutely. When you have rapport, when you have relationship, when you've been with them, when there's trust, mutual trust that's built up in there, absolutely, you have that right. But this is what Jesus is saying first, kind of deal with your own stuff first. This doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have like your life all figured out and sin less, because nobody is that. It'd be like you calling somebody out on Saturday night, they got drunk at a party, but Friday night you were. That didn't fly. Like, you need to deal with your stuff before you start calling out friends. But you start to manage what it is that's going on in your own life. And then once you have that under control, is probably a little strong because we all sin, and every day we sin. But when we've been working on that, then it's time to make a move. Then it's time to have a tough conversation with a friend. And here's my guess. We just don't like tough conversations. Human beings, that is. We don't like tough conversations. We don't like what it does inside of us. Like some of you right now are probably feeling a little uncomfortable because you know that there's a tough conversation coming. Not because of some guy on the stage that's saying this, but because God's been prompting you to do this and you've been neglecting it. You've been avoiding it. Some of you probably know that there's one coming your way from someone else in your life, and you've kind of been dodging them a little bit. And some of the reasons why we avoid it is because we don't want to be challenged. We just like to keep it the way that we are. We like life to be a little bit simple. We don't want to challenge others, especially our friends, because we kind of fear we'll lose them. Right? If you call them out, it'd be like a fear that they won't want to be around you again, and there'll be like rejection, and we wouldn't want that. I contend, though, I think one of the main reasons why we have a hard time doing this with the people that we love, with Christian brother and sisters, is because we don't know how. Maybe we've not been modeled that, not seen that in front of us. We don't know how, and so we just don't do it. And I want to just spend a moment with you, sending you off to groups, giving you some things to think about for how to have challenging conversations with people wherein you can invest time into them. They can invest time into having challenging conversations with you. Here they are. I'm going to fly through these. Number one, and at the end of these, when I get all 5 up there, take a picture of it with your phone. And these will help you in discussion later and then help you process this when you get home. Number one, ask God to guide you. A little obvious, but I just don't want to miss it. Like when you get ready to have a tough talk with someone, that you're asking God to discern the things to say and not say and the timing of it, and just to prepare your mind and heart for what to do in those settings. Number 2 is to check your heart, which is a super churchy Christian phrase. It's another way of saying just understand your motives. Like what's the motives that you might sit with somebody and have a conversation with them about their life? Number 3, watch your tone. I just wrote that for myself. It's like my own little deal there. Galatians 6:1 though says to do that with respect. To have that tone of love and understanding, and not one of like, I'm trying to be superior over you, or I'm trying to be better than you. Fourthly, look in the mirror first. How am I doing with this? I'm going to call them out on something, but man, have I been dealing with this in my own life? Do I have a handle on that? That's what Jesus says in Matthew 7. And then lastly, think about the way. Think about the way. I was sitting down with a friend, and we were getting lunch. I knew going into this lunch that he had some news he was going to share with me, and he shared with me some things, some decisions he made in his life that were a problem. He's a Christian, been a Christian a long time, and I'd already known what was going to go on, and I already thought about what I was going to say when I got into the lunch. And I remember uttering these phrases. What he did is inconsequential, but what I said was these words: and I am so disappointed in you. You ever heard that word before? It's like the worst. It's the worst word you can hear from somebody. I am so disappointed in you. I said, man, I thought you knew better. And then I'm sure what he heard when I kind of concluded was like, man, I just think for all the time and investment people have made in your life, I would have expected more out of you. Man, I damaged that friendship. I actually don't think that friendship will be repaired to what it was. God can do whatever he does in that, but it was damaged. sometimes we just don't know how to sit with people and how to challenge. And that setting is actually not even what he needed. He needed me to just be a friend. He's already working on it with Jesus. He's already there. So let me ask you a couple questions. Is there anybody in your life that needs challenging from you? Anybody comes to mind for you? Well, let me ask this. Do you need to give someone permission to challenge you? Have you kind of held off that because it's uncomfortable? Like, legitimately, do people know, especially Christians, that love you, that spend time with you, that you trust, that are here in the settings with you? Have they been given permission from you to, like, hey, you can speak into my life? Anytime you see something that's out of bounds, out of who God's called me to be, you can call me out. Here's what's at stake when it comes to friendship. If our friendships are just challenge less, what ends up happening is they just become paper thin. Hard times come around, challenging times come around, those friendships just sort of shred. They move on. Real Christ-centered friendships necessitate challenging. Hard talks built on truth and love and grace. And I pray that today and this week and in the coming weeks, you'll have opportunities to challenge your friends. Let me pray for you. Father, thank you for our group. Thanks for today and tough talk. Really tough talk and one that's difficult for us to receive and difficult even more so to live out because we're scared. And we just know that at the end of the day, our friendships, the ones that will really last, are the ones that we have this built-in trust and ones that we can grow with one another and hear difficult messages from. Put us around those people. Father, help us to love that way, to develop friendships in that way, and appreciate you, love you. It's in your name we pray. Amen.